Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to go ahead and welcome our next speaker for the day, Abeer Tadmore. Well, Abeer is an authentic bilingual teacher who grew up in a family of teachers. Teaching is not just a job for her, but a mission to inspire, co-learn, and innovative learning environment that helps students become compassionate, confident, and inspired to challenge themselves. During her 15 plus years of experience, she grew the ability to be more flexible, patient, and adaptive through the valuable relationships with multicultural learners, parents, and of course, amazing educators. Aside from daily school routine, she is an adventurer, a baker, and an Arabic children book writer. Let's go ahead, put our hands together, and welcome her aboard.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, I am Abeer, and I'm very glad to be here with you all in the Saudi Smart School Summit. Today, it's so exciting for me to be discussing with you how to integrate technology into project-based learning. This is what we were going to discuss, inshallah. So the first thing we're going to do is just to take an overview, a quick overview of what is PPL. PPL is we can discuss it like a project-based learning. It's like the technology or the teaching method in which teachers plan units as a whole projects instead of teaching it into pieces, but making it into one whole project and just planning that and allowing students to express themselves and really having their own voice and choice and achieve all the academic outcomes or the learning outcomes for that unit. So just a quick overview. This is basically from PPL works, and you can see that these are the essential elements that we need to follow whenever we are planning a PPL project. So first we need a problem or a question, a challenging thing for the students to start thinking, but it should be really leading them directly into more a sustained inquiry where they inquire, question, and more have their own research to answer the questions. It should be authentic. So authenticity is very essential to project-based because it's more about students themselves. It's not about like only the topic. So if you're say talking about animals or wild animals, you need to talk about wild animals in the area where students are living so that they can feel more integrated into it. They can search about it. It's more personal about them. They need to have more voice and choice. And of course, they will have to work towards making a public product that they will present to authentic audience. The audience need to be outside the classroom, other teachers in the school, maybe students or other stakeholders like the parents or like the administration office if you want. Another thing is that you need to make sure that every step you need to go back, make critique and revise. So you need to teach kids how to criticize, how to give feedback to each other, and then revise the work they have done. And finally, once the whole project is done, just like any activity that you're doing with your students, it's very essential to do a final reflection. So students can reflect on what did they learn, what did they do, and how did they get all the knowledge and learning they get to. So this is in general what PPL is. And of course, you can get back to PPL Works and get all the information you want. PPL Works is an organization that provides all the information that you might need. And of course, you can also follow me and ask me anything by the end of this session. So why do we need technology in PPL? Like PPL is great by itself. We can just help the students really get encouraged to do a project, to research about things around them. But why do we need technology in it? The answer is very simple. I think that we all share the same idea, that it is the future. So we need to make sure that our students are future ready. So they are good digital citizens. They know how to go online, how to discuss, how to talk to other people around the world and be really into it and know and understand what does it mean to be part of this digital age. Another thing that we all faced and never expected 5 or 10 years ago is the distance learning. We never expected little kids or like school children in general to be attending classes online. But this is something that we can see nowadays, and it's more like the norm. So we can just have technology. Without technology, we can never do that. Another thing is something that we might have heard about. It's the digital nomads. We know that more people are working online from all around the world in projects in other parts of the world. So we need to prepare our students to be ready for that kind of workspaces. Now, what kind of technology we need? I mean, we really need to identify the right tools that we can use to enhance PPL. So the real life technology is the main key that you need to remember whenever you're thinking about a PBL tool, or in general, any technology that you're using in your classroom. The first thing, or the first part of technology that you will need in any PBL project is a collaborative space. So remember, PPL is a project, and for a project, you need a team or a group of students working together. So you need more like a project management tool for them to be cooperating with each other. So you have two options here. Most probably, I prefer the real workflow apps for, like, let's say, elementary and high school students, whereas the educational app might be more used with primary. But still, it's your choice. It depends on your school policy, your district policy. It depends on your choice, what your students know, and what are your needs. For real workflow apps, I'll just give like 4 apps for each one of the things that I will discuss, but there are tons of apps out there. You can go out, search, and you can find all the things that you want. Facecamp is my favorite for real workflow app, and it's free for educators. You also can have Trello, Kissflow, and also Asana. All of these and many others are real workflow that are used in real companies, but you can use them in your classroom to give your students the feel of a real work or a real job. For educational apps, you can just simply use your school LMS. So your school LMS can be used. You can use the integrated like discussion panels, the assigned tasks. You can make groups using it. Depends on the LMS that you are using, whether you're using Toddle, CISO, wherever any apps that your school is using, you can use that. It's always better to start with your LMS. If you don't have one or it's not what you need, you can use Google Hangouts and Zoom or Teams. And preferably, I prefer Teams. If you're not using Zoom, you're not using any other. Teams is great because you can assign tasks and they can have like tasks done, and this can be shown in all the group, and they can use many other integrated apps inside Teams. But again, it's your choice. Edmodo is another free app that you can also use to make groups and assign tasks for your students, or allowing them to assign tasks for each other and really managing their project. Now, once the project is done, you definitely need a media creation tool so that they can create something to present to others. So they can choose whether they want to do a presentation. So they can use like a PowerPoint, Google Docs, Canva, Prezi, anything, Peer Deck, anything that you want. I mean, like the sky's the limit, right? You can use Nearpod, you can use many presentation tools. Other side, you can also ask them or allow them to use a video creation tool like Loom, Movavi, Animoto, Animaker, or any other one, or just simply their phones to take a video. Now, once they're done, they finish their work, or even through the process of the project phase, they need reflection time. They need to reflect on what they're learning and what they know already and what needs to be improved. So you have 2 options here, but they are for different tasks. The first one is a survey tool, and that's usually used for other people outside the classroom. So if you want your students, for example, to survey other students around the school, if the project is related to them, you can use these survey tools. Or if you want them to really, like they're high school students or really old enough to do this, you can help them create a survey to ask people in the neighborhood, let's say, or this around the city, if, for example, they're discussing something about the environment or the community. So they can use many survey tools like Google or MS Forms. They can use the Pull Everywhere. Typeform is beautiful. Kids usually love it. And also SurveyMonkey. Again, for polls or surveys, you find many applications. Try to find the ones that will really work for you. Many of them offer like a free plan also. Now, another thing that you will need for reflection is really feedback, whether it's feedback from the teachers involved in the project or other students who are working on the project. So they need to give, like, let's say, constant feedback so that they can really improve their work they're doing. So feedback tools include Flipgrid, And I know that those who love Flipgrid, and one of them is an amazing tool because it allows students to record video, audio, comment on each other, and it's really amazing and free, and also it's very safe for students. Audacity is a great tool also, where you can use audio only or just the LMS discussion channel, right? Again, your LMS mostly contains many, let's say, integrated tools that you can use. So a real advice, start always from your LMS, whatever you have there. And then if you don't have it, you can go and grab another tool to add up to your project. And if you really want to spice it up and let the kids have fun and feel like more engaged, maybe Discord is another idea. Most of the new generation is really using it, and they usually love it. And it's a great tool to really give feedback, create channel between each other, and give more feedback and ideas. Now, mostly these are the general tools that you're going to need, but of course, these not all the tools that you're going to need. You'll still need specific tools for your specific project. So if you're doing a project related to geography, you still need tools like Google Maps, for example. Or let's say you want to do something about animals, or let's say about the environment, you might need a newsletter tool, right? So you can go grab, say, Adobe Spark and then create a newsletter, or other apps that kids can use to create a nice visual, like an infographic or any other visual that they can hang around the school or share with parents or people in the city they're living in. So how to choose these tools? So what is the standard to choose these tools? There are just a few do's and don'ts that I created for you, but these are not everything, but they are the basics again. So the first thing, let's start with the do. So when you're using technology, please address your PPL needs. So if I'm using technology, it's not about just cramming up all the technology tools. It's about using exactly the tools that I need for my own project. Second thing is focus on handful of apps. I know that sometimes we teachers just like apps and we feel like, oh my God, this app is really nice and that one can really add up to my project. But this will just confuse the students. Really giving too many apps will make them feel confused and cannot focus on the target that you are using. So just use a handful of apps, just the ones that you really need for your project. So for example, in my slides, I could have just crammed like 100 applications for the things that I've talked about already, but I didn't, because this will just make you more confused. I just choose like 4 as an example for each slide. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is to plan ahead. I mean, project-based learning cannot be done in a day. It's something that you need to plan really ahead. Make sure that when you're planning the PPL, you know exactly what tools you're going to use. It's very essential to know that really before, so that in case, for example, let's say you're using a new tool and you need your kids to learn about it. Say I'll give you an example. I was teaching my students and I needed them to know how to use the paint. So I talked to the ICT teacher and we agreed that during this unit, they will learn how to use paint. So if you are using, say, PowerPoint and you know your students don't know, you can use your ICT teacher to help you and support you and integrate that into the BBL project. Now, another thing is allowing your students to explore. If your students are old enough to explore and find other applications, give them that space and freedom. If they're too young, give them the basics, but allowing them to explore other features inside the app. Trust me, they will surprise you. The last thing, don't forget to provide support. I know you would think they're, digital age, everything, all of them use apps, they use mobiles and all kinds of tablets or devices, but still that doesn't mean they know everything. They're still kids, they still need guidance. Even if they're in high school, they might still need your guidance and support. Now, once you're done that, please don't do these things. When you're using technology, don't use it just to fancy up the project. Again, I know it's nice. I know that sometimes some tools will make your final product so shiny and beautiful, but That's not the point. I mean, the real point of project-based learning is to get the students to do the real work and feel the real life. And the same is for technology. It's about really giving them the technology they need for this project, not to make something that's fancy. So make sure your students are engaged in the idea of the project and not in the tools. If you're just making them engaged because you're using Discord, let's say, because it's fancy and they like it, this doesn't mean they will make a good project. It means they will just spend the time chatting with each other on Discord. And it's not what you want. As a teacher, you need to make sure that they are really involved in the question you asked in the beginning of the PPL, and they really want to work towards the ending, not the tool. Another thing, don't overload. I know that I said that more than one time, but please don't overload your PPL with tools. I mean, you can just cram up all the tools on the internet, but that doesn't help students. It will just make it more complex for them. Just give them like 1 or 2 options for each of the stages in the PPL, or just a handful of one, and try to use the ones that they know. I mean, if you're using certain tools, try to choose the ones that your students already know. This will make them feel more comfortable with the tools while learning. Instead of spending time learning about new tool, they can spend the time really focusing on the project they are doing. And don't assume they know it all. They're still students. They might know the outer face or the basics of something, but they do not know everything. You need to make sure that they do. You need to make sure to really provide the place for them, or the time where you can come and ask me about any digital tool that's inside this project. You need to make sure that you give them enough support. You need to be really knowledgeable about the tool that you are using and really support them to it. Last thing, don't restrict your learners to technology. I know, yes, I said it's important to use technology. I said it's important for their future, but still, some learners don't feel comfortable using technology. And we do not want them to feel like restricted and really unable to participate into the project just because they're not into technology. So give them the space into using other things, especially when you're dealing with like little kids. They usually don't like much technology. Maybe they don't feel comfortable with it. So give them the option of drawing the project or making it like a handmade thing. So allow your students the voice and choice to choose how they want to present their project or how they want to carry out the project. Okay, don't just push like you have to use technology. Just give it as an option. And honestly, you know, kids, once you push them towards something, they usually want the other. So just give them that option, and trust me, they will choose technology. That's all for today. I know there's lots and lots to talk about technology and PPL, but in this time given, I think that I tried to give you a full overview. You can still contact me using my Twitter handle or LinkedIn. I'll definitely love to help you and support you and answer any question. I will be also available for your questions now. Thank you so much for listening and for being here. Okay, here's a question. With remote learning, how can schools and teachers make sure the effectiveness of problem-based learning is not diluted? Well, this is an amazing question, and it's one of the questions that I asked myself, honestly, at the beginning of this year, because in Saudi Arabia, we're still remote. And I know that it's a little bit hard and tricky, but if you really divide your PPL into chunks, and make sure that, like, say, every week you are going through one of these pieces or chunks of work, this will help students really know how to go on step by step until they reach the final project. It's not the perfect way, but we still need to manage it. Again, the technology tools that I mentioned and many others can help you depending on the project that you're working on. So some technology tools will really put students, like when we talked about workflow technology tools, this will help students know like what task is done now, is it done or not? They will mark it if it's done. And then, for example, Basecamp is amazing for this because it will send a notification at the end of the day for the students so that they can write what they did, what they didn't do, what they still need to learn. And I think this is a great way of making sure you are on the right track until you achieve all your projects. Okay, another question. How can we measure the understanding level of students who are part of the group dynamic during PBL? Beautiful. Okay, now measuring the understanding level is not really, like understanding cannot be measured, but usually you need a rubric. And this is something, thank you for asking, because I forgot to mention at the beginning. You really need to create that when you create your project. Once you create your PBL, you have to create a very specific rubric for the students to know what is expected from them. When you tell your students what you expect him to learn and what you expect him to do all through the project, he will end up doing and understanding and even reflecting if he did that or not. So say you're making a project about the environment, and then you want to make sure that your students understand what the environment around you need, and they understand recycling, they understand. So you just add that in your rubric, like you need to understand this concept. You need to make sure you collected information about recycling, what is the cons and pros of recycling, let's say, how to create a plan for recycling for your community. And then, like, depending on your question or your inquiry into the project base, you add those marks, or let's say checklist if you don't like rubric. So say you have just your checklist, and then you can see if this student did that or not. Now, another thing you need to make sure is assigning roles for students. Like when you put them in a group, and this is something you need to do not only in project-based, but in general when you're assigning groups for students. You need to make sure that each student know exactly what his job is. So say one of them, his job is recording the data they're collecting. He's still learning, right? You can see the data that he recorded, and then you know that while he was writing all of this information and organizing it, he learned the information that he did. You can do, when they're presenting and talking about their project, you can see how much they understood about it. So there are many ways, like observations, like as I said, the rubrics, the checklists. You can even give a checklist for students. As I said, the reflection is very important, project-based. So you give them a full list of reflection of what the things that you wanted them to learn. Again, this is about, like, let's say, general science, social. If you're integrating Arabic, English, other subjects into the BBL, that will be like tested. Let's say almost aside, you will say, for example, you're talking about the environment and you want them to write an Arabic essay or an English essay about it. Then you can just evaluate that essay, right? I mean, it's just like any other essay you ask them about, but this time you ask them to write an essay about something they are working on. So you would say, write an essay describing your experience doing this project, or write an essay to someone telling him why it's important to help the environment. So there are many ways to really measure. It depends on what exactly you need to measure. I don't know if there are more questions. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for, and thank you, IBE Forum, for really inviting me in. It was really an exciting experience.
A session full of learning was with us. Thank you so much for sharing your inputs, and I personally believe learning never stops.